Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainable Activism webinar. My name is Lisa Levinson, and I'll be your host for this webinar today. And this webinar is part of In Defense of Animals' Sustainable Activism campaign, where we offer emotional and spiritual tools for animal activists and animal advocates who care so much about animals and spend all their time and energy and resources helping animals. And we also want to help you as well. So thanks again for joining us. We also have a support line, so if anyone needs or wants free counseling or to connect with another activist who cares, you can reach out to us at 800-705-0425. Again, thanks for joining our webinar today. We're going to feature Lama Tashi, and I'm going to give you a little more information about him right now. We're really delighted to have him visit with us today. So the Venerable Tashi Nyima is an ordained monk in the Jonang lineage of Vajrayana, or Tibetan Buddhism. He leads the Universal Compassion Buddhist congregation with Sanghas in Texas and in Mexico. For more than 3 decades, Lama Tashi has shared the Dharma in North and South America, Europe, and in Asia. He is studied under eminent lamas of various lineages. Known for his directness, clarity of expression, and sense of humor, Lama Tashi shares the Dharma in fluent English and Spanish. He's been an animal rights advocate for the past 51 years and leads twice-yearly meditation retreats, specifically for activists. He is the author of the Dharma Handbook, the annotated Pure Land Sutra, and the Buddha's Bowl, a collection of Buddhist canonical instructions on radical compassion for animals. So it's really my pleasure to bring you in contact with Lama Tashi. Hello, Tashi, how you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're delighted to have you, and we also have guests in all sorts of areas. We've got people with us on the webinar, as many of you can see. We also have guests in person with Lama Tashi, and we have guests who've joined us on Facebook Live as well. So we welcome everyone, and we're all very eager to hear what you have to tell us today, Lama Tashi.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I think I'm going to turn off my webcam and we're going to focus on you for a while, and then we'll come back together and have a Q&A.
Very well. One does not have to be vegan to be Buddhist or Buddhist to be vegan, but one needs to be vegan if one is claiming to be Buddhist. And I know that this is something that sadly is not true today. If it were, we would make a great stride in the world. That's because there's approximately 900 million Buddhists around the world. So if we all decided to follow the instructions of the Buddha and our teachers, we would be much farther ahead in our quest to free animals from the horrendous situation in which they find themselves. Now, of course, the message of Buddhism is not only for those who accept the full doctrine of the Buddha. The message of Buddhism is the message of joining or uniting wisdom and compassion. And the issue of animal rights, animal liberation, is one that exemplifies, perhaps in one of the most stark manners, that need that we face now as a world society to unite our wisdom with our compassion. Why do I say that? Because we are becoming more and more aware of the incredible harm that is perpetrated through animal agriculture on our planet. Animal agriculture is the single most important cause of climate degradation, of human hunger, of water scarcity, of deforestation. There are so many effects that we are suffering, that we are finding each and every day. So if we really apply that wisdom, we have to understand there's something that's got to change. Something has to give. Something cannot continue the way it is. On the other side of this equation, we have compassion. And compassion is a desire to reduce or eliminate the suffering of other sentient beings. Now, if we look at the situation in which most animals find themselves, we will see clearly that we have deprived them of their liberty, we have deprived them of their habitats, we deprive them of their lives, we torture them, we enslave them, we consume them, we destroy their lives, we destroy their families, we make it impossible for them to accomplish their purpose in life, which is not to serve us. Their purpose in life is to be happy. All sentient beings want to be happy. We want to be happy, they want to be happy. And we're equal in the sense that there is not a single sentient being on this planet or anywhere else who thinks less of her or his own happiness, who thinks less of her or his own importance. We all think that we are important, that we are worthy, that we have a right to live. Then, if we understand that and we unite this wisdom of the effects, the horrendous effects of animal agriculture, and the tugging at our heartstrings of the compassion that we feel for the suffering of animals, we cannot avoid the one evident conclusion. We must change how we relate to non-human animals. The first thing that we have to do is we have to stop abstracting ourselves from the natural order. And when I say that, I mean humans have this tendency to think that we are somehow separate, that we are so different, that we share very little with other animals, and that justifies our dominion over them. If we look really closely, we are one of 8 hominid species on this planet. And we share with them not only most of our DNA, but we share with them many of our most salient traits. Like all great apes, we like to live in social situations. We like to have our families. We like to have peace. We like to be able to enjoy our lives with beauty, with kindness, with the company of others similar to us. If we look beyond the hominids, we find that we're not so different from all other sentient beings who also want to be happy, who also want to live. So from the basis of the equality of all sentient beings, we should come to the conclusion that what we do not want for ourselves, we should not want for others. The Buddha Shakyamuni said 2,600 years ago, having abandoned the taking of life, refraining from the taking of life, we dwell without violence, with the knife laid down, scrupulous, full of mercy, trembling with compassion for all sentient beings. When he says, trembling with compassion, we should understand that this is not a rhetorical device. We should feel as if it were our own, because it is, the suffering, the pain, and the horror of other sentient beings. We cannot continue to inflict such severe pain and suffering on others and expect that we will have happiness. Right? If we look at the foundation of Buddhism, which is ethical conduct, we find that the very first precept is to refrain from depriving other sentient beings of life. However, it is not merely an injunction not to kill directly. And the Buddha said in the Shudraka Agama, we should not kill any living beings, nor cause them to be killed, nor should we incite any other to kill. To never injure any being, whether strong or weak, in this entire universe. There is no possible excuse for the continued exploitation, enslavement, and slaughter of billions of sentient beings every single year for what appeared at some point to some minds to be human convenience. The Buddha also said, I am a friend of the footless. I am a friend of all bipeds. I am a friend of those with 4 feet. I am a friend of the many-footed. May all creatures, all breathing beings, all beings one and all, without exception, experience good fortune only. May they not fall into any harm. So I particularly wish to address those who are currently making changes in their lives. In Buddhism, we say that guilt and shame are not only useless, they are destructive. One should not feel guilt and shame for one's previous mistakes because they were based on ignorance, and ignorance cannot be punished. Ignorance can only be corrected, right? If we don't know how to do something, we should not be punished for it. We should be instructed, we should be helped to do it correctly. Just like a little baby, a little human baby does not know how to walk. So when they first start walking, right, they take maybe half a step or 1 step and they fall down. What should we do? Punish them for not knowing how to walk? No, right? We encourage them. We show them, we help them to take the next few steps until they can walk on their own. So one of the things that I think is absolutely essential for animal rights activists is to abandon the strategies, the forms, and the attitudes of those that we so vehemently criticize. We cannot overcome violence with violence. We cannot overcome anger with anger. The Buddha also said, anger can only be overcome by love. This is the law everlasting. If we adopt the same strategies, then we're only replacing one kind of malice, one kind of oppression with another. We need to maintain our inner peace while we do all that is in our power to reduce and eliminate the suffering of animals. Now, I know that perhaps many of you think that anger is a strong motivator in the animal rights movement. And I would ask you to please consider the reality of anger. If you look at the biological, endocrinological, physiological effects of anger, you will see that far from being something positive that can help us in our efforts to help animals, it detracts from our ability. One of the things that happens immediately when we become angry is that our body chemistry changes, and it does not change for the better. It is actually harmful to us to harbor angry thoughts, angry emotions. But perhaps most importantly, when anger arises in the body, we are in a state of stress. And in a state of stress, the human being is hardwired to focus attention and to lose peripheral vision, not only in the physical sense of sight, but also in terms of our options, our mental options. When we become angry and stressed, we lose perspective, we lose context, and we can only resort to the old duality of fight or flight. When we maintain our peace, when we keep our equanimity, then it is much more possible for us to look around and explore all possible avenues to attain whatever goals we have set for ourselves. We also need to have patience. Now, I know that the time is not long for this planet if we do not make changes now. But feeling rushed is not the way to get to where we're going any sooner, right? If you are agitated on your way to wherever you are going, very often you will encounter more difficulties, more obstructions, more impediments than if you go peacefully and decidedly but slowly. It is alleged, I don't know if it is true, that Napoleon once told his personal valet, dress me slowly because I'm in a hurry. Right? This is something that Latin American mothers repeat very often to their children. Vístanme con calma que voy deprisa. Right? Whether he said it or not, it's actually a very important lesson that we should have. If we do things in a rushed manner, we are not able to take into account all that needs to be done. I believe in English you have something similar, but more in the field of carpentry. I think you say measure twice, cut once, right? Meaning that we have to take the time to prepare so that our actions are well thought out and they do not come from a reactive sense. If we allow the behavior of others to dictate our emotional state, then we will constantly be reacting instead of acting. So there are some lessons that Buddhism can share with all activists, and we can help bring about the changes that we need in a way that does not betray our goals, our objectives, which is to establish a world with more peace, with more justice, with more kindness, with more compassion, with more wisdom. Now, I have to address these issues because one of the things that I always hear whenever I speak of animals, and I do it often, is the famous, but the Dalai Lama eats meat. Right? It is almost as common as the famous question, what would you do if you found yourself on a deserted island with a pig? Right? That's a question I think that is posed to every vegan. Whether the Dalai Lama eats meat or not is absolutely irrelevant to what we decide to do as individuals. First of all, the Dalai Lama is not the Pope of Buddhism. The Dalai Lama is actually not even the leader of his own lineage. His lineage is the Gelug, one of 5 Tibetan Buddhist lineages. And he is a very respected personality, but has no legal or any other authority, and certainly not moral authority over the rest of the Buddhist world. He does, however, encourage people to be vegetarian. But I find the whole argument, right, that somebody, a prominent Buddhist, eats meat, used to defeat the argument for wisdom and compassion. I find it ridiculous. It has nothing to do with what we do. It has nothing to do with how we feel. It has nothing to do with our deeply held convictions. Let me ask some of those people who are so concerned about the diet of the Dalai Lama, if they actually are so obedient to the Dalai Lama, do I also meditate 2 hours a day? Do they also do the other things that he does every day? Of course not. Right? It is merely an excuse. Why do some Buddhists feel the need to defend their lust for flesh and blood and eggs and the secretions and the body parts of animals? Why? Because we're all sentient beings, we're all human beings, and we were brought up in particular cultures. I often say to people who say, this is my choice, I explain to them, your dietary habits, unless you have changed them afterwards as an adult, your dietary habits are not your choice. You were placed as a child in the high chair of indoctrination, and you were fed by your parents, and basically you learned to like what they gave you. Your culture established what is it that most of us like and what things we don't like. It is not a coincidence that our Mexican friends tend to like Mexican food, that our Chinese friends tend to like Chinese food, that our Greek friends tend to like Greek food. It is just the way that they were indoctrinated by their own families in their own cultures. So this whole argument, it is my choice, it was never your choice. The question then becomes, what is right? What is appropriate? What is beneficial? what is good for the planet, what is good for the animals, what is good for human beings? That is the true question. And the answer to all of those questions is the same. We need to develop compassionate eating, compassionate behavior. We do focus a lot on eating habits, but it's not the only thing that we need to address and change. We need to eliminate the absurd, illogical, unproductive, and harmful habit of testing drugs and so-called healing technologies on defenseless animals. We need to stop utilizing animals to do our hard work. We need to stop using animals for entertainment. We have to respect the autonomy. We have to respect that animals have their own purposes, and they are not here to provide us with food. They are not here to provide us with entertainment. They're not here to provide us with test subjects. They're not here to provide us with free labor. If we understand the basic equality of all sentient beings, we will then move towards true veganism. I often laugh when people say, is this product vegan? The product cannot be vegan. Right? The product can be plant-based, but a vegan involves, right? A vegan implies that there is a consciousness that purposely seeks to reduce or eliminate the suffering of animals. No insentient object can be vegan. There can be no such thing as vegan food, right? There cannot be, vegan cosmetics. There can be plant-based cosmetics. There can be cruelty-free cosmetics. But only sentient beings can be vegan. Right? Only sentient beings can cultivate in their hearts the desire to eliminate the suffering of all sentient beings. So I encourage you to look around and see what is it that we can do. And I say this because there's a big, big danger of burnout in the community, the animal rights community, the animal activism community, because we see so much suffering. We're surrounded by so much suffering that sometimes we become overwhelmed. And there's an excellent book that I recommend. It's rather substantial, but there are some, some summaries available. A book by a Tibetan Buddhist monk, Matthew Ricard is his Western name, and the book is called Altruism. And in it, he explores the relationship of empathy, which is feeling the pain of others, and compassion, which is actively working to reduce it. And when we are in just an empathy mode, we have a tendency to become overwhelmed and depressed. When we move to the mode of compassion, which is an active approach to reduce or eliminate the suffering of others, burnout is not possible. It's not an option. So find something to do. Find a way to contribute to the welfare of animals. Find a way to reduce the consumption of animal flesh and animal products. Find a way to promote the respect for all sentient beings. There are so many different ways. Be kind to the animals on the street. Be kind to the animals in your own backyard. Be kind to human beings who also need a lesson in kindness, who need to remember the intrinsic compassion that sometimes is buried deep in our hearts. So please, please find a way to express your kindness and your compassion in a way that does not perpetuate the cycle of violence, the cycle of oppression, the cycle of supremacy. We cannot replace the carnist or the speciesist supremacy of some humans over animals, or most humans over animals, with the ideological supremacy of vegans over others. We are literally in this together. Our fate as a species is intimately bound with all other members of our species, and beyond that, with all other sentient beings on this planet. So let us begin to join, right, our wisdom, our understanding with compassion, and make all the necessary connections to know that all acts of oppression, all acts of suppression, of oppression are related. All acts of oppression come from the wrong view of separation and supremacy. And we have to overturn those and replace them with what? With the right view of interdependence and the right view of the equality of all sentient beings. So I think that at this point, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them, and reminding you that there are no foolish questions, although I am certainly capable of providing foolish answers.
Well, thank you, Lama Tashi, for your amazing Dharma talk today. It was so enlightening and also validating for many of us who are vegan. I want to invite people who have joined us. If anyone's joined us on the phone, you're welcome to press *4 to ask a question. That will unmute you. And if you're with us on the computer, you can actually unmute yourself. There are some little icons. One, yes, I think we heard somebody. You're welcome to. Yes, you can certainly show your webcam, click on the video icon, and also
I haven't got a webcam.
Oh, well, if not, then you can chat and we will hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, tell
Yes.
us your name.
My name is Donald Kronos. I don't have very good eyesight up close, and a friend of mine sent me the phone number, and I texted her back asking for the phone number. I didn't realize I had it, and then I found it, and I called it, and then I didn't realize I needed to go back and find the code that went with it. So I missed most of what was being said, but what I caught near the end there, I don't know, the last 5 minutes of it or so, it sounded like, I mean, from the description he's giving, it sounds like I'm a vegan, which is puzzling since I've never really quite understood exactly what vegan means. And then I got even more confused when he basically said there's no such thing as like vegan food, which, I mean, I hear people talk about vegan food quite a bit. So I think I sort of understood what he meant by that his use of the word vegan doesn't match their use of the word vegan. But I would think, though, that just from a linguistic standpoint, that, that one person's, use of a word is as valid as another. Where the word came from or what's intended by it is another story. So if I can ask, what is the distinction being made there? I mean, is that from the etymology of the word, or is that is that meant to be an intention being expressed, as in like the word should mean, more sentient things. I mean, for example, a hamburger, a cheeseburger isn't sentient. Obviously,
right.
part of it used to be, but then again, every breath we take, we're breathing in oxygen that was breathed by some other living thing. As a matter of fact, there's enough atoms of oxygen in the average breath. We're probably breathing in an atom of oxygen from just about every other human who's ever lived. And that was all part of a living thing as well. So, I mean, the whole thing is really complex from my point of view.
What I meant is,
yet I very much do advocate for pretty much everything you were saying. So, in that sense, that would make me a vegan, but I don't think I am because I don't know what one is. So how could I be? Making sense or no?
yes. The distinction that I made is not to create problems. It's just to focus on the fact that there has to be an intention, right? And insentient objects have no intentions. So only sentient beings can have the desire to reduce or eliminate the suffering of others. Objects cannot. Now, things can be vegan friendly.
I would agree with that. I don't know exactly where you draw the line at sentient, but I would think though that even a being with just a bare minimal capability of having feelings and recognizing that something else has feelings as well should be able to desire to reduce the suffering of others. And even if they don't recognize that others have feelings, at least be able to recognize the desire to reduce suffering of themselves. And as a population of cells, of course, that would be cells within them desiring to reduce the suffering of other cells within them. So in a sense, it's the same thing. It's just a matter of scale. Am I making sense?
Sure. Yes.
We do have another question. I was wondering if we could address a different question. And thank you.
I've had enough of an answer. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. So Liz is asking, from the Buddhist perspective, how do you suggest that we deal with the feelings of angst and despair over the treatment of animals? It can be overwhelming indeed.
Certainly, yes. And I try to address that just at the end of my talk. The feeling of being overwhelmed can only be countered with action. When we stay in the phase of empathy, which is to feel, right, what they are feeling, to see the horrible conditions to which they are subjected, right, we can indeed become completely overwhelmed. When we start acting, when we start taking steps, the deeper our feelings, the more should we act to counter the suffering of animals. Now, a lot of people tell me, but what can I do? This thing is so big, right? Animal agriculture is so huge. The scale is so immense that I cannot possibly make a dent in what is happening. And I beg to differ. You can make a big difference. You cannot save every animal, but the animal you don't eat is safer. The animal you don't exploit is happier. The animal that you help, right, is suffering less. So, it's an old trope, but, you cannot change the world for all animals, but you can change one animal's world. And actually, if you follow, right, a plant-based diet, if you refuse to participate in industries that are cruel to animals, you actually can make a huge difference. There is some information, I don't know how trustworthy it is, but that 400 million fewer animals were killed in the past few years because of the rise in vegan activism, in animal rights activism. That is a small number compared to the actual scope of animal agriculture, but it's still a substantial one. And we can make these changes. So let me give you some examples. Here in the Dallas area, some members of our Sangha join with others who are not Buddhist. And we come together every month on the first Friday to make vegan sandwiches for the homeless. Now, who thought that that was a thing? Well, actually, there's a big demand, right? We make literally hundreds and hundreds of sandwiches, and they go in one morning. In one morning. Who knew that homeless people are asking for vegan sandwiches? Well, now we know. There are so many different ways.
That actually makes sense.
Yes. So
That they would.
whatever we can do will actually reduce our own suffering.
Can I comment on that thing about the homeless thing?
And we do have a couple of other questions, so if you don't mind holding for just a moment, and
Sure.
we'll come back to you.
A reason why I said it makes sense. So, but yeah.
Mhm. So Becky has a question. She's asking, do you find that more Buddhist friends are going vegan or staying where they are in terms of eating?
Thank you for that question, Becky. Let me tell you my impression, right? I arrived in Texas. I live in Texas. I arrived in Texas about 10 years ago. And boy, did I find a lot of steak eating, right? And little by little, we have started talking about the suffering of animals. We have started talking about the importance of really internalizing and observing the Buddhist precepts. And I would venture to say that a substantial proportion of our Sanghas, I'm talking about in excess of 85 to 90% of the members of our Sangha are at the very least vegetarian, if not fully vegan. The problem that I find is that most Buddhist teachers refrain from giving the full message because they're afraid of losing followers. Actually, I've been advised many, many times to lay off the animals, right? I will not, right? And I see the changes. I see the growth of the awareness among Buddhists of the need to abandon those practices that are contrary to the Dharma. The Buddha said, eating animals destroys the root of compassion. And enlightenment is the union of wisdom and compassion. If you destroy the root of compassion, there is no possibility of enlightenment. And I'm sorry, but I don't mince words. If you continue to oppress, enslave, slaughter, right, by proxy even, other sentient beings, it is not possible to become enlightened. You can say namaste all you want. If you keep hurting other sentient beings, you're not making spiritual progress. Buddhism is not here to help us delude ourselves. It is here to make us assume responsibility for our thoughts, for our emotions, for our words, and especially for our deeds.
Thank you. Lama Tashi, for this. And also, I wanted to extend another thanks from Liz, who answered one of her questions, and she said it was really helped a lot to reduce our suffering as activists, some of the things that you're sharing.
I'd like the opportunity. I don't know if this will come out reverse, because very often in these cameras it does. But there is a book that is edited by Dr. Will Tuttle, who I believe has been in your webinars before. It's called Buddhism and Veganism: Essays Connecting Spiritual Awakening and Animal Liberation. And it's available, and I don't get a penny from it, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just if you need inspiration, if you need different Buddhist perspectives on how to go about your activism without losing your center, then I encourage you to obtain your copy of this book.
Thank you for suggesting that. That book actually is fairly new. I believe it just came out recently.
Just came out, yes.
Yeah. Great. So if anyone else has a question or a comment, you can put them in the chat box, or if you'd like to share your webcam and tell us what you're thinking and feeling about Lama Tashi's presentation tonight, we would really appreciate it.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I say what?
Yes.
Oh, never mind. Never mind. Go ahead.
We have somebody. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Lama Tashi, for your kind words and wisdom. I wanted to ask a question, and you don't have to answer this in full right now. Maybe I can connect with you later. But I wanted to know your take on activism outside of specifically diet change, and like more addressing the idea of activism, like how you see protest and open rescue and these types of activism. So I just wanted to see what your view or how your take is on those kind of things. And again, you don't have to go into detail about this now.
Thank you. Actually, we have conducted, and we're happy that we don't have to do it anymore, but we used to picket Ringling Brothers whenever it came to Texas. We have picketed the Dallas Zoo when it brought some elephants that were supposed to go to a sanctuary. Being peaceful does not mean being passive. It just means maintaining your sense of equanimity and maintaining your goodwill for all, including the perpetrators of injustice. Now, what I do want to say is that if we become angry when we do these things, then we are losing our own intentions, right? We are, to use a cliche, but we are joining the dark side of the force, right? So we have to be very careful that our activism maintains its awareness. There is some really good information on how to be an engaged Buddhism, and there's plenty of writing, some of it by Thich Nhat Hanh, but there are many other authors who have addressed this. So I would say that no, we need to be in all areas of activism.
People keep. What I wanted to say earlier about the homeless people. It makes a lot of sense that they would prefer to get vegan food if they can, because to put it rather bluntly, if somebody thinks mainly of themselves, they're not likely to end up in a situation where they're at high risk of ending up homeless or something like that. It's thinking of others. It's risky. I mean, it's good to do, but it is risky, and
Yes.
So that's common out there.
Right. The other thing that I wanted to quickly say is that remember that humans are animals, and sadly, I have to remind people, but for example, we're also very active with the Texas Coalition to abolish the death penalty. Because what we do to any sentient being is part of our mental tendencies, part of our habits. So if we think that it is all right to terminate one life, why not terminate another? So we have to make all the connections, right? The oppression of different segments of our population is also something that Buddhists must become engaged with, right? Economic oppression, racial oppression, gender oppression, sexual orientation oppression. All of these forms of oppression have exactly the same root. And we can't be going around saying, like, my oppression is more oppressive than your oppression. Right? Because literally that's what people do. This is more important. Well, whatever is next to us. That is the real meaning of taking care of our neighbor. Neighbor means that one who is next to us. And whatever it is that they are suffering, then it is our duty to get in the way.
Thank you very much, Lama Tashi, for that wonderful answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And please, if you are so inclined, you can contact me at greatmiddleway@gmail.com. We also have a blog, Great Middle Way, at wordpress.com. We keep it very simple, Great Middle Way, all the way.
And Lama Tashi, I think you have an online meeting of some kind, or an online...
Yes, it is in Spanish every
okay.
Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Our wonderful Mexican Sangha meets virtually online. If you speak Spanish, you are very welcome to join us. Just write to me and I'll give you the link.
Fabulous. That's good to know.
I want to thank Lisa because I'm actually quite technically incompetent, and she has guided me through this webinar experience and made it very easy for me.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. It could be the blind leading the blind, but at least we're leading each other. And I also want to thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful webinar, and I've really enjoyed a lot of the examples that you've given and the teachings that you've shared. And I think that this is also, this sentiment is expressed by many of our listeners today. So if anyone has any other comments, anything else you'd like to mention before we close, and you're welcome to share your webcam. Sometimes that's fun to see who's with us, because we actually have quite a large group tonight.
Okay, so I did want to say thank you.
Chime in.
Oh, thank you so much.
Can I chime in with a question?
Yes, please. Sure.
So I have a question. What is your take on the range of veganism? So I've actually just finished and had a master's thesis accepted on vegan spirituality, and so I learned through this that there is a range from junk food veganism to raw living foodism, for example. Yes. And I'm realizing that I'm in a way different place than most people at this point, but I cannot resist, because we are, like you said, animals. What about how we treat ourselves? So thank you for taking one more question.
I think it's a wonderful question, and I think that we will find that when we do what is best for others, that is usually best for us as well. Right? So in terms, junk food is sometimes, vegan junk food can be delicious, right? It can be delicious, but we also have to recognize it has a particular carbon footprint.
Right.
Yes, and it may not be the best thing. All the packaging, I mean, we have a whole vegan industry that is contributing to, the accumulation of plastic and garbage,
Well, and
which
also,
is
like,
not very vegan.
what about plastic shoes that, in my view, are not vegan? Plastics, synthetics. I'm going. I'm just really interested in that now. So I'm
Well,
wanting your take on that as well.
I think it's a part of the process. They're better than leather, right?
Well, so
But
that's
there
a
are
really interesting. That's an interesting question from my perspective, because we live in an area of petrochemicals in Western Pennsylvania, and it's killing us as
yes,
humans right now in the production of plastics, and not just us, but the whole chain of animals,
yes,
plants, and the oceans and the plankton. And so I don't believe, with all due respect, I'm
uh,
holding the phone with one hand, so I can't do this with both hands. But with all due respect, my husband is coming into my rescue here. I think that what the statement that you just made is not true, because of just in the whole scheme of things and in the whole picture. And I think it's really important for the vegan community to look very carefully at that picture, because
yes,
what is considered vegan is not vegan.
yes. I agree with you ultimately, but I think that we need to also encourage steps, right? And you're not going to go from a complete speciesist behavior to an enlightened vegan attitude. There are steps. So we begin by avoiding the most direct forms of harm, and then we begin to understand the interconnectedness of all of our actions and the effects on the planet, on climate, on the soil, on the air, on the water. So yes, ultimately, it is not less harmful, but it's less directly harmful, and it begins to plant the seed of compassion in our hearts, which can then grow. And I encourage people like yourself, activists like yourself, to keep educating other vegans. But that's not vegan 101. That's vegan 523. Right.
Okay, sign me up for that, to teach that class.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're coming towards the end of our time together, which has been incredibly valuable and sacred. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you'd like to turn on your webcams just so we can all see one another, it's just really a treat to see so many wonderful people who care deeply about animals. We're all really part of the same vegan community, the same tribe. We might be at different places, either 101 or 525 along the way, but we're all on the way. The
And
great
if you
Venerable.
will allow me, Lisa, to finish with a very short prayer of dedication that we use here in all our Sanghas. By the merit accrued through all our virtuous acts, may all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all embrace happiness and the causes of happiness. May all abide in peace, free from self-grasping. May all attain the union of wisdom and compassion. Ahum Soha. Thank you so much. You have been extremely kind listening to this old, bold guy
Oh, well,
for
Lama
so long.
Tashi, it's been quite an honor to listen to you. And I say that from everyone, and also to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It's been really a delight. Hopefully you can join our next webinar. We have them every month. This one's on the first Thursday of the month, and we invite different leaders, such as Lama Tashi, to join us. So thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.